the Chicago Bulls take a tough loss to the Los Angeles Lakers, and it brings a few concerns to the lineup and how things kind of played out for the Chicago Bulls. But we're going to get into that right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to Chi-Town Sports Pod. The Chicago Bulls take a tough loss today to the Los Angeles Lakers, losing 129 to 118, and are back to 500 on the year. And today's game, it was a little shaky. We got outplayed the entire game, and it was probably one of the worst first halves I've ever watched from the Chicago Bulls. It was very shaky in the first half, and the turnovers were very, very bad. They had 10-plus turnovers in the first half. They ended the game with only 15, which is good for the second half, but having 10-plus turnovers in the first quarter or the first half is not ideal when playing a team like the Los Angeles Lakers, who have LeBron James and Luka Doncic and people like that who are very good playmakers and are very good out in transition. And that is not something you want to see from the Chicago Bulls. And I feel like there were also a lot of defensive mishaps that happened throughout the whole game. But my biggest concern coming out of this game is with Matas Buzelis and why he only played 22 minutes. He had 11 points on 4 of 8 shooting, 2 from 6 from downtown, and 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Obviously, he had 3 turnovers, but he's young. You have to give him time to develop. You have to put him in situations like that where he continues to play and learns from the mistakes that he makes. And I don't think Billy Donovan is really using that to his full potential. Matas Buzelis is a player who has, honestly, star caliber talent, and only allowing him to play 22 minutes is not something that I thought would have happened in a game like this against the Lakers. Kevin Huerter was in the game a few times where I thought Matas should have been in, and Kevin Huerter honestly had a very bad game, very rough game. He went 0 for 5 from the field, 0 for 5 from 3. He did not take a 2-point shot. But there were definitely a few situations where I thought Matas should have been in. Matas had to guard LeBron on a few plays, and obviously LeBron is a lot bigger than Matas. But I definitely think that Matas held his own. But that was one of my biggest concerns coming out of this game. Coby White had a great game. He had 23 points in this game, shooting 8 for 13 from the field and 5 for 10 from 3. 5 rebounds, 6 assists. He also had 4 turnovers. He's averaging a career high, almost 3-plus turnovers in games, and that's something not really particular to what happens with Coby White and how he plays. So there's definitely some concerns surrounding that. Definitely with his injury, he's talked about having some ball handling issues. He doesn't really have it as tight as on a string. And there's been some complications with that. And the injuries definitely had an impact on him this season. But I definitely think that averaging 3 turnovers a game, 4 turnovers a game as our starting point guard or shooting guard really shouldn't be happening. Josh Giddey this game, he did pretty good. Came off the bench again. He played 28 minutes, had 19 points, 6 14 shooting, and 6 rebounds, 7 assists. He also had 3 turnovers. So, as you can tell, the turnovers are really piled up this game from multiple players on the Chicago Bulls. But honestly, Josh Giddey, Stacey King, and Adam Amin really talked about it. When is Josh Giddey going to not come off the bench anymore? He's come off the bench the last 3 games, and I think he's looked really good coming off the bench, and he's exceeded his limit for the playing time. He's had the limit on how many minutes he could play, but I think Billy Donovan has used more than what he should be playing. And I think that Josh is ready to get back into that starting lineup and kind of propel the starting lineup to be better. Obviously he had the 3 turnovers, but that's something that can get cleaned up. And obviously a team like the Lakers, they're very good defensively. They've been kind of an iffy team this year. They're very up and down, but they are 28-17. And, it's been a bit of a rough year for the Chicago Bulls. 23-23 is not really something ideal. Vooch had a very good game this game, though. He had 18 points, 6-10 from the field, and 11 rebounds, 5 assists. He also piled in 2 turnovers. So, the turnovers really were the big key factor and the problem in this game. Defensively, the Bulls didn't played their best game. We didn't have any blocks on the game. We had 0 blocks. The Lakers had 3. So I think this game really stood out with our defensive liabilities and what we need to do on defense and the different things that we kind of struggle with on the defensive end, as well as our turnovers on the offensive end, which lead to fast break points for the opposing team. They had 27 points on 15 turnovers. We only had 19 points on 8 turnovers. So obviously when you give up the ball more, the Lakers are going to score more. They're very good in transition. Jackson Hayes runs the floor very, very well. Especially when Vooch is out there, it's going to be very hard for Vooch to kind of keep up with Jackson Hayes. But I think this game was just very iffy. We didn't shoot the ball terrible from 3, but the biggest, you can't really stop Luka and LeBron James. LeBron had played 33 minutes, 24 points on 9 of 19 shooting, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. And then you have Luka, 46 points, 15 for 25 from the field, 8 for 14 from 3, and 7 rebounds, 11 assists. That's a typical Luka game, but you kind of have to slow him down. You can't let it get outrageous and stuff like that, but he honestly really could not miss. And then another big factor of a player that really stood out and kind of shot the ball absolutely amazing this game was Rui Hachimura. He could not be stopped. 23 points on 29 minutes played, 9 for 11 from the field, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, and 1 block. That's exactly what you would expect from Rui Hachimura. He's very, very consistent. He can shoot the ball very well, lights out, and he was hot today. He had the ball on a string. He was hitting his shots, getting to his spots on the floor, and just knocking down the open shots and that the defense was giving him. And then you obviously have LeBron. This Lakers squad is very well-rounded. Obviously, their season's been up and down, but their record shows 28-17. This squad is very good. So we'll kind of see how it plays out and all the different things. Definitely a rough game for the Chicago Bulls, and watching this game, it was not the best of first halves. The first quarter I really enjoyed, 35-31. At the end of the first quarter, I thought they played very well, and then going into that second quarter, 34-25. You have to be consistent, and I feel like that's exactly what the Bulls are not. They have not been consistent at all the past 6 years. They're very mediocre, and the play has been very stagnant, and there's been a lot of different things that have played into the lineups and plays and games and everything like that have really been shaky. But Bulls take a tough loss tonight against the Los Angeles Lakers, and we're going to roll into the next game, hopefully with a little momentum and keeping our heads up. And I hope Billy Donovan is really talking to him. And I really hope Billy Donovan does not only play Modest Buzelis for 22 minutes. He's a young player, star caliber young player that could potentially be a power forward or small forward that could be in our lineup for a very long time. And I just don't think that only playing him 22 minutes is going to cut it to really let him develop. But he also did make the Rising Stars game this year. And that's my exact point. I think that Billy Donovan really has to let Modest play through his mistakes and learn from his mistakes and not take him out when he is making the mistakes. Because you have to learn, you have to develop, and those are the things that help you do that, is just playing through it all. So we'll see how that all plays out for the rest of this season. But we're going to have the trade deadline coming up, so there's going to be a lot of content coming out. So we'll see how this all plays out and see how the Chicago Bulls can shake up this lineup coming up on the trade deadline next week. But that's going to be all for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.